Recording in progress.
Yes, we are going to record this and post it on our YouTube after and send it out to everyone who has registered. And while we wait for people to come in, we'll just hang out. And people are starting to come in now. So awesome.
This on do not disturb. Oh,
Hey, everybody, if you are joining us, we were just waiting for people to pop in, and people are coming in pretty quickly, and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we'll just give people just literally a minute or two to come in, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, I can talk a little bit about who we are and what is going to happen today. So my name is Allison Crable, and I'm the Executive Director for the Summer Camp Society. If you do not know what the Summer Camp Society is and you just clicked on this webinar because it looks cool, that's awesome, and we're glad to have you. The Summer Camp Society is a professional development network for camp professionals specifically. Also, youth development professionals take advantage of our resources. We just like to put out as many resources, free things, options as possible to help make camps better, because we really think that when you make camps better, you make kids better, and that makes the world better. So that's the whole vision of our impact. And we are so excited to talk to Nelson today. Nelson Strickland is one of our faculty members, and that is a new thing that we have going on at the Summer Camp Society. So he's fancy and faculty and awesome. So we're thrilled to have Nelson. And Nelson is also, he has done our inclusion specialist training in the past. Have you done any other trainings for Summer Camp Society other than inclusion specialist?
I believe it's mostly just inclusion specialist and kind of hidden curriculum and some blog as well.
Oh yeah, hidden curriculum you've done so far, and you have another one coming up, the hidden curriculum inclusion specialist basics that you're doing for our Power Pack, and then you also have the all camp activity boot camp in the Power Pack.
That one's gonna be. I'm excited for that one. That one's gonna be sick. I love like just big games and all group games and stuff like that, and finding ways to be creative.
That's super cool. So we'll have all the information about the next step things that Nelson has coming up in our blog. He also wrote a really cool blog about music that I put up on our website last week if you want to go read it. But then later this week, we'll have all the QR codes with his playlists come out so you can read that. Actually, they're going to be all the codes with his playlist come out so you can listen to Nelson's playlist, which is awesome. And it'll just be really cool graphically and aesthetically to look at. So keep an eye on our social media for that later this week.
Yes.
Give us a little music recommendation for today right before we get started.
For today,
we can only listen to today, Nelson.
I've been listening to a lot of R&B recently, actually. Specifically more like there's an artist called Muni who has a song out that's called Hours and Hours, which is definitely more so for adults, but definitely would recommend that. I've been listening to a lot of old school Southern rap. I guess not old school, but I guess like now that it's like early 2000s is like now old school for some people, which like kind of hurts a little bit on the inside. But things like Ludacris and T.I. I've also been listening to a lot of lo-fi music. Lo-fi music I love is like just great for studying, great for reading, great for honestly great for anything. Sometimes I can get hyped to lo-fi music. It like builds my day up. And the best part about it is that you can like find lo-fi music for any kind of like genre, right? If you like pop music, there's a lo-fi cover of it. If you like rock music, there's a lo-fi cover of whatever your rock music is. If you like hip hop, if you like reggae, if you like Latin music, I can probably guarantee you somewhere on YouTube, somewhere on SoundCloud, somewhere on Spotify, there's a lo-fi version of the song that you like out there. So that's my music recommendation for today.
Awesome. Well, we'll be on the hunt for lo-fi country music after this. So
awesome. I don't know.
Go ahead and jump in and get started. Just so everybody knows how this will work, Nelson will share his ideas with us. I'll ask some questions. If you have additional questions for Nelson, put them in the chat or do the little Q&A feature, and I will get those to Nelson. So Nelson, we're gonna get started and just tell people about you a little bit. I know that you have had like every role at camp, from counselor to director and everything in between. You've been a consultant for so many camps across the country, and you've helped with like staff training, program development, Jedi practices, which hidden curriculum maybe for some people might not know that Jedi practices are those that are the Jedi stands for justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. So a lot of times we hear about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Jedi is the addition of justice to that. I know you've gotten to present at Tri-State too, which is awesome. Again, you're faculty for Summer Camp Society, which is awesome. So you're doing really awesome stuff out there. What else do people need to know about you before we get started?
I always like to share like just how I got started with camp, and I give a lot of credit to my mom because when I was 11, my mom told me I was going to camp. I told her no, I wasn't, and then a week later I was at camp because that's how moms work. But then I fell in love with it, and I haven't summer since. That's been almost 2 decades now. Um, I think also you mentioned I have done a lot of like speaking and public speaking in front of people, but something that I think that just like never goes away is that how nervous I get before I actually go on. Like that's like a real thing. Like I'm nervous right now. But what I do is, and actually what I want to do right now for anybody that's out there, right there, Allison spoke about the chat feature. And I kind of even want to throw a chat challenge in there right now before I continue explaining. But if you know like how to finish this sentence, if you can finish this sentence for me, just type the rest of the sentence in the chat at the bottom. And the sentence is fake it to you. Right now, if you know like what the end of that sentence is, right? What's the end of it? Like everyone should just be in there just typing it, right? Fake it till you make it, make it, make it, fake it till you make it, fake
You
it till you
gave it
make it.
away.
Well, I didn't give it away. We got like so many people in here that know what it is, and so like that's kind of what I would do when I started presenting. When I started presenting, I would like tell myself I just gotta fake it till I make it. And more recently, what I've done is I've kind of rephrased it to like be better for myself. I have nothing against people who still enjoy fake it till you make it, but I prefer the phrase be humble while you stumble. And what I mean by that is that like I know that this is something that is like nerve-wracking for me sometimes, and I know that likely in the first 10 minutes I'm gonna stumble through. I'm gonna stumble through this first 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna find my groove, and we're gonna be going. But what I like to do also is tell people how they can support me through like my stumble, right? I like to let people know how they can help me, help you, help me, help you, right? That's because that's what we're all here for. And the best way to help me is like if you hear something that I say is like really resonates with you, or you hear something that like you're like, yo, that was dope, and it's like, yo, that other stuff you said was pretty cool, but like that right there, that was on the money, right? Just like use the chat feature to give big ups. Use the emojis I think that we now have in Zoom. You raise your hand, whatever it is, right? Show some love if you ever see anything that I do that you're just like you can do it even if you're doing it at home at your computer, right? Just do one of these. Like if you like to dance, I like to dance. This is my Millie Rock. Do one of those. And that's how you can support me. That's one thing I like to let people know about that. The other thing I like to let people know is that oftentimes my mind moves faster than my mouth. So there may be instances where I am explaining something and it is just not clear. So what I encourage you to do is if you hear something I say and you need more clarity or you'd like me to elaborate on something, please ask questions. And actually, let's practice that right now too. In a second, I'm going to say something that like kind of won't make any sense. And you'll definitely go like, it doesn't make any sense. And then what you're going to do is you're in the chat, you're just going to ask a question about like follow up on clarity. Like, what did you mean by that? Or can you elaborate? Or no way, can you tell me more? Something like that, right? So, and I'm going to do it right now. And I think the key to like middle management is really just knowing that that some turtles can breathe out of their butts. What did you mean?
I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure a lot of other people do. Okay, that name's gone. Cheryl's just like your hype person.
Let's go, right? Can I elaborate on butts? No way, no way. Tell me more. Absolutely, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you more. So actually, you can definitely Google this like either right now or like after the webinar. But some turtles can breathe out of their butts. But I definitely appreciate you for asking for clarity. So those are two ways that you can help me just kind of as we go through, and I'm going to be able to get the information to you much more clearly. And also, what I like to say is that like what we actually just did as well is I think we just demonstrated and we practiced what I think are the two most important skills that you need to be a successful middle manager. And I think what they are tell people how they can support you early, and do not be afraid to ask questions. Ask them in abundance, ask them elaborately, ask them simply, ask them all the time. Those two skills, I think if we are able to, and like I just showed 2 ways and we just practice it too. And I think if we can practice those 2 things, if we can tell people how they can support us early, and we can, as middle managers, we can ask a lot of questions. I think if we practice that between today and the end of summer, there's like no way that you can not be successful at camp this summer or whatever position you're doing this summer.
Yeah, and something that we have talked about as well is like realizing who is here in this room right now. And so I know we have people, first of all, like we talked about yesterday, we kind of had a little conversation offline about how middle management is so many things, right? So it really runs the gap of like maybe your seasonal leaders, maybe the full-time people, it's all over the place. But in this room, we might have some just seasonal middle managers. We might have people who are executive directors looking for information on how to work with their middle manager. So if you are a middle manager, all this is going to apply to you directly, and great and easy takeaway. And if you are maybe an upper manager looking to pass this information on to your middle manager, A, you can give them the recording, which would be great. But B, it's important for you to stay here and stay with us, because hearing these things that Nelson has to say are going to help you build these skills in your middle manager. So just because we might be addressing middle managers directly, it really goes for both sets of people. So if you're wondering, am I in the right place? You're in the right place. This is for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's also important to really kind of almost before we even get started in like the skills that we just talked about, like what is a middle manager? And what I think about when I think middle manager is as I think 3 things, right? I think butterflies, I think alligators, and I think construction workers. And here's why. And here's why. Um, right. I think middle management is this very fluid role. I think it's this role where you have to like be flexible, and you have to like, and you're giving direction, and you're giving guidance all the time, and you're also receiving so much information, but also you're relaying this information, and you're making decisions constantly. Um, and like there's so many different avenues to middle managers, whether you're a health officer, you're a head counselor, you're a program director, you're a head nurse, you're a unit leader, a divder, like whatever it is, right? Like that's all middle management. Middle management is like you are responsible for supervising somebody, and somebody's responsible for supervising you. And like if you're in that gray area, you're doing all of these things. And the reason I think of butterflies, alligators, right, is because I think oftentimes what happens when, and from both my personal experience and just communicating with other people with similar roles, is that there's this expectation for you to be able to do all of these things successfully, and like be like super affluent and doing all of these roles and being flexible and giving direction and guidance, or being that charismatic person while also being the organized person that can make the schedule. And I think there's this expectation for you to be a chameleon and kind of just blend in and mold. And I have a love-hate relationship with like the idea of being a chameleon, because I definitely see the allure, but I don't think that I think it's okay to not be a chameleon. I think you can be a butterfly. And like what people don't know, what I think most people don't know is that butterflies spend at least like 7 to like 10 hours after they come out of their cocoon just figuring things out, right? They don't just start flapping their wings and flying off into the sky, right? They take time to figure things out. They stumble through being a butterfly for those first 7 hours until they figure it out, and then they are able to succeed in those spaces. And I think butterflies and alligators are more so like, and butterflies are also able to blend into things that they're strong in, right? If you have like a butterfly with green and brown wings, right? They're gonna be successful in like a forest and dense grassy areas, but they might not be so successful if you put them in the North Pole. And that's what I think is okay. I think it's okay to know your strengths as a middle manager and be okay with also stumbling through the places that you're not okay with, right? Alligators do the same thing. They're strong in the swamp, but maybe on the side of the road in Florida, they're not the strongest, right? They're not like the apex predator. So that's what I think when I think of middle managers, is being able to be a butterfly and being okay with being with your strengths and stumbling through figuring out other things as you proceed and as you grow. I also think construction workers are more specifically bridge builders. Middle managers are the liaison, are the bridge builders, are the gap closers between all the different areas on camp. They're going to be the ones, right? As a middle manager, it's more likely that you interact with campers than your director will. But it's also more likely that you interact with your director than campers will. It's going to be more likely that you interact with your head nurse or your health officer than maybe your head chef will, and vice versa. And you're going to be going kind of floating throughout these roles, and you find ways to bridge like the gap and bridge the gap, mainly between ideas. You're building this idea bridge, and you're bridging the gap there as a middle manager to kind of really set everyone up for success, and find ways where you can build people up from afar. And that's what I think of middle managers. So I think butterflies, alligators, and construction workers.
I love that. And I love what you said about, the butterflies spend the first few hours of their lives kind of figuring things out. But to share with everyone else, I have an 8-month-old. And so I'm watching him literally figure everything out. Like he's in there learning to crawl right now. And I think sometimes need to give ourselves the grace of like, we have to learn to do everything. So if you're not great at something initially, or if you're given a task as a middle manager, you're like, I've never done that before, and it's not perfect the first time, like nothing that you've ever done in your life has been perfect the whole time. Like we all have to figure things out. So just remember to give yourself grace and like time and patience and understanding in that, and to give that to other people as well, I think is really important. And to give it to our campers, right? Like you kind of talk about that when you talk about the hidden curriculum in a way, like we have the expectations that they'll just come in and like know things, but no, they stumble through and have to figure things out too. So I think that's so applicable to like so many parts of camp.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love like just revealing the hidden curriculum of anything, because I think it just makes everything clear, right? I reveal the hidden curriculum of you guys, like how you can support me, right? Can you imagine if your counselors came to you, or whoever you supervise came to you, and they just revealed the hidden curriculum of like what they enjoy? And like what if they were like, yeah, my favorite color is purple, and I like eggs, and like you just got like a dozen purple Easter eggs, like just because, and like you just know how to make them happy right away. Like I think revealing the hidden curriculum just makes everybody's lives easier and happier, and makes people feel included.
I also want to stop because I always like kind of like when I'm writing stuff for the Summer Camp Society, because we talk about the hidden curriculum a lot. I'm like, the hidden curriculum is hidden curriculum in a way. So can you just, we'll get back to middle management in a second, but I think it's going to pop up several times. Can you just like tell us what the hidden curriculum is in like a couple sentences or so?
Absolutely. I'll do three. I'm going to limit it to 3 sentences. The hidden curriculum is saying all the things that normally aren't said out loud, out loud. An example of revealing the hidden curriculum would be telling somebody what to expect at lunch before they actually get to lunch. So that would include things like, you're going to go and sit down at the table. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You can expect loud noises. You also have the option to go outside and sit there. This is a long run on sense. Don't count this. You also have the option to go outside. You have the option to get sun butter and jelly if you want to, if you don't like the meal, right? All of those like little instructional things that give people the options and expose them to the area that they're now about to be submerged in, is revealing the hidden curriculum. And the more we do that for people, the more comfortable they become in those spaces initially.
Yeah, I love that. Perfect. I was just writing in the chat too that like where to pick up special diets, the huge one that I think of when it comes to food service. But moving back to middle management, but if you have any questions about the hidden curriculum, Nelson, we can keep it to the end, see if we have time, because I know Nelson loves to talk about that as well. You have mentioned a few skills or like things that we expect middle managers to have, like they have to have flexibility, influence, decision making. Which of those do you feel like holds a little bit more weight than the others?
I would 100% say decision making. I would say decision making, and not because of that it holds more importance than either being able to influence or give direction or being flexible. I think just the sheer frequency at which somebody in a middle management position has to make decisions is like the most important thing. And I think right, and I think sometimes we think of decisions as like big things, where it's like what are we going to do for like our huge staff banquet at the end of the year, or what are we going to do for when it rains? Like that's like a big decision. Like how are we going to make sure everybody's safe? Like it's about a thunderstorm. That's like a big decision. But like also small decisions are like, who goes first to get their food, or like what counselor or what cabin am I gonna invite up to the infirmary or our getaway is what we call it, to get their meds, right? That's a decision that you have to make. A decision that I've had to make is that I will never forget is, how much sand do we need to buy to restock our waterfront? And that's like a weird decision you have to make. Or like a decision like as small as like, where am I going to set these chairs up for the evening activity? How many pool noodles do we need? How many tennis balls do we need? Do we need more basketball? Like just like the sheer amount of decisions that you make in middle management right, exactly. Like what mileage do I need for the slip and slide car? Exactly. Like there are so many decisions that kind of go into middle management. And so I think that is a skill that I think we really want to work on and improve and actively work on to build to be a successful middle manager.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm gonna go off script a little bit, so sorry. But let's talk a little about, you mentioned flexibility is decision making being the most important one. And I want to get back to that in a little bit and how we can build decision making. But let's pause or go back to flexibility or influence. What do those have to do with middle management and why are they important to middle managers?
Can you answer that one more time?
The flexibility and influence, what are those and how do they apply to middle managers?
So flexibility and influence. So influence, like I'm going to start with influence, and that's just kind of being able to sway events or decisions to go in a direction that you see as like a positive direction. And influence might be something as like being able, and there's a video that I'm actually gonna send out as a resource, and it's by I think Derek River. And it's about who's really the leader when somebody starts a movement, and it's about it's called How to Start a Movement. And in the video, there's a guy that starts dancing, and then he talks about how that person is like leader because what happens is everybody else starts dancing. But really, what he says is the true leader is the first person to follow them, and that first person to follow them is like that major influence and getting the rest of the crowd to feel comfortable doing that thing. And I think that once almost like you get to a position of middle manager, and typically you get there by being elevated from another position, you now have that influence, right? You have almost that like almost that swagger, almost in a say, to influence things and be able to do things just by doing them yourself. So that might be kind of like cheering somebody on after a talent show, right? Or being comfortable being the first one going up in front of everybody and doing show and tell or making that morning announcement, and then inviting people up to come follow you. And that's kind of the influence that you have to start movements and then bring people on for the ride with you. And I think that's the influence you have as a middle manager, and being able to navigate that influence, right? Because again, once you get to that, once you become a middle manager, people are now looking at you for expectations on how to behave in the environment. And that's the influence you have. It's like just by existing in an environment, your mannerisms, your actions kind of influence what others feel comfortable doing or what they feel safe doing in that environment. A clear example of that I've learned recently, like in the past couple of years, and I'm kind of upset that I'm not doing it right now, and I might actually change my name, is using pronouns. Like using pronouns, and like just using pronouns is like, if you're in an influential position, if you're in that middle management position, and you're comfortable using pronouns, right? You now make it safe and comfortable for a lot of other people to feel comfortable using pronouns in that way, because you're seen as a leader. In terms of flexibility, I would say like it's very similar to like the decision making in terms of being able, like that butterfly, or like being able to go into different situations where again you're going to be floating and you're going to be having those cabin chats more often with your campers and the director as well, but you're also going to be making big decisions like and it might be difficult decisions alone, like do we need to send somebody home, or do we need to have a difficult conversation with this person, or this person needs a little bit extra help. So that kind of flexibility and being able to kind of go between mindsets of am I talking about my roses and thorns right now, or am I talking about how can we schedule everybody so that they have enough time off? And that's the kind of flexibility that I think.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a lot of thinking that we kind of talk about in the summer camp society in general. Like Jack Schott recently had a blog post for us of like, are we thinking too small about our hiring basically? So I think it's just like middle managers and everybody really in the camping industry, like think bigger. And that reminds me of like when I was first starting out as a camp director, I don't know where I heard it because this was like years ago. So if I got it from you or you've heard it, like not trying to steal it, I know I didn't come up with it, but it was the idea of like, how do we get to yes? And I think that especially with COVID, like I know personally, like the camp that I was at made the decision to run it 2020. That is controversial. I'm not here to debate about that or say whether or not I supported it. But we had to run. I felt like it was safest for me to stay there and to help our campers, and that was going to keep them the safest. But it really pushed me in a position where I was just like, very stressed out and felt very confined by our policies and very nervous about people getting sick. So it was just became no, no, no. And I think other people probably felt that in 2022. Like it's just your blanket reaction instead of being like, how can we do that? Is no. So it's how to get to yes, I think is part of that flexibility that you're talking about and a good skill for middle management. So like just saying like, let me think on that and get back to you, then actually thinking on it and get back to you and like finding a way to get to yes, I think is huge as part of that. And then I want to go back to you, what you talked about with influence, because we have talked about this a little bit before. I think you build that influence through building community. And I think also like you as a middle manager, like people want to be in community with you. You see that all the time when you walk across camp, like the director or the program director or the waterford director walks across camp and everybody, all the counselors flock to them because they're like shiny, and all the kids flock to them because they're like shiny, because it's just someone you don't see that much. So they like want to be in community with you, and building that community can help build your influence. I know that you said there's something that a mentor recommended to you to do, and that you've kind of taken your own spin on it as far as like a list of checking in with people or going to places.
Absolutely. So, yeah, a mentor, and kind of like being able, when I first started, and got like that first middle manager position, which I believe was just my unit leader when I was a unit leader, or a div director, some people, was a mentor of mine had recommended for me, what had worked for them is to make a list of everybody in the space or at the camp, and then make a point to intentionally have an intentional or a personal conversation with them at least twice a week. For me, I was at a camp with like almost 100 plus people, and that was just like not feasible for me at the time. So I kind of just redid it or rephrase it for myself, to be successful for myself. And what I did, you might be going to something here, Katie. So what I did was I reworded it for myself, and I changed it from 2 people to I made it a point to visit each location on camp at least twice a week. And what I found was that, and in my position, I had a lot of flexibility to kind of move about the spaces as I saw fit. However, not everybody has that kind of freedom or that flexibility. So oftentimes, just by going to different spaces, I knew that I was going to be able to interact with a plethora of people or a myriad of people, because my waterfront or my lifeguards are always going to be at the waterfront or at the pool. My nature specialists are going to be in the woods across the lake. Right. Also, like, right. I sometimes I knew that my director was going to be in directory type spaces, because that's just where directors are. Right. They're going to be in the office. They're going to be on the porch drinking coffee. They're going to be at their favorite bench across the lake. Right. I knew that they were going to be in those directory type spaces. And as long as I made it a point to visit those spaces maybe once or twice a week, I knew I was going to have a nice, deep personal conversation where I got to really grow and learn. And connect with my director. And the same ways for campers. I know that if I go to cabin 1 twice a week, or if I go to cabin 3 twice a week, I know I'm going to be able to engage with those campers in that space, because I know where they're going to be. So that's my advice when we're trying to build community and kind of use our influence, is kind of visit at least each space on camp like twice a week. And I think that's a lot more doable than trying to track people.
Yeah, awesome. So back to decision making. You mentioned, sorry, back to decision making. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Like, how can we build that? What is a good skill about it? I know we talked about it some, but what other advice do you have?
A wise man once said, whose last name may or may not have been shot, the only way you get better at making decisions is by making them. And I firmly believe that as well. I think the more we just make decisions, the better we're going to get. But I think also there are some things that we can do to like actively make sure that we're making, when we think about making decisions. And I think you mentioned it almost a little bit as well. And like, how do we get to yes? And a good way to kind of how to get to yes when making decisions is to use the phrase yes and. And that kind of relates back to that idea of like bridging the gap between ideas. You're going to have to make decisions where the ideas of the people you're managing, as well as the ideas of people that are supervising you, don't always line up. They're not always going to be on the same page. And the ability to say yes and is how you can not only not shoot down someone's idea, because what happens when you do that is they feel less confident or less comfortable with you coming to you with ideas. And that's what you want. You want people to bring you their ideas. You want to you want to be able to involve people in making decisions, because that's how people feel invested and have ownership over like the space that they're in. But using yes and allows you to add to their idea, and then also suggest any kind of suggestions or changes without saying like your idea is like invalid or not good. And what this may look like is that your counselors may have an idea for how they want to go about the evening activity skit, and your director has a very clear vision on how they want to do the evening activity skit, and how you can go about this is saying yes, and what if we also did this other thing that Shayla brought up about how we can also use plungers as pool noodles. I don't know, right? But like being able to not shut down people's ideas, but make decisions where you can include people's ideas is definitely going to help you in your decision-making process. I think another very good thing or a very clear thing to kind of understand when making decisions is the difference between the right decision and a decision. Not every decision that you're going to have to make, not every question that you're going to answer is going to require the right decision in that time. And if we answer every question, or we handle every decision that we have to make, trying to make the right decision, we're going to overwhelm ourselves because there's so many right decisions. And I think being able to identify the difference between whether something needs the right decision or a decision is going to help us and kind of preserve our mental capacity and make sure that we're still operating at full speed. And an example of where you might need a decision versus the right decision might just be how many chairs do we need in the dining hall? And you might say 30, and the right answer might have been 40. But the thing is, it's not going to be that critical when you get to the dining hall and there's only 30 chairs, because you'll realize that you still need 10 more chairs. And in that moment, you can make another decision where it's like, we should go grab like 12 more chairs, right? Like that's a time where you just need to make a decision and make sure that things are still moving and make sure all the processes are going, right? And then there are going to be instances where you might need the right decision. And that might be one of those things where you don't make a decision in that moment. And you take the time and you take your 7 hours to figure out and kind of learn and figure out the entire situation. You play a little private investigator and figure out what is going on, so that you can make, in your opinion, the right or a good decision. And I think those two things, both using yes and to bridge the gap between conflicting ideas and things like that, as well as deciding or deciphering between the right decision and a decision, are going to be two skills that we can work on actively to improve our decision making.
Yeah, I love that last one that you said. We talked about that earlier this week, and we were renovating a house too, and so I had to pick out all these fixtures. I've just been staring at fixtures for weeks, and after I talked to Nelson about this, I was like, I don't need the right decision. I just need a decision. I just have to pick a faucet, not the best faucet. So it's really liberating too in a lot of ways for middle management, which I think is great. And something that I think about the yes, and I think it's also important to like. I really had to realize this as I got older as a kind of middle manager. And I think that younger ones might struggle with this a little bit more, especially the ones who might have just stepped from counselor into that middle management role. Is our responsibility as middle managers is to build community and to keep camp on track. And so I was previously the executive director at a YMCA camp. So middle management between our senior leadership, who was an hour away, and then between our staff who reported to me. And it was my job as a middle manager to make sure that the senior leadership of the Y as an association never thought anything bad of my counselors. And it was my job too to make sure that my counselors never thought anything bad about the Y. And so that's, I think, an important part of it. Just setting that expectation with your middle managers is great as well. And Ross said also decision fatigue is real, and it really is.
Absolutely. You'll be in an office all day and just making decisions, and it'll be 5 o'clock by the end of the day. You're like, why am I also physically tired? Right? I haven't actually moved, but actually the decision fatigue is so real.
Yeah. So middle management is often a person's first time introduction to supervising people. So can you give us insight into how you go about managing others?
Absolutely. I think I spoke a little bit about it with like kind of the yes and kind of decision making, but I think being able to involve people in decisions and give them ownership definitely goes a long way. And it almost works twofold, because I think it gives people kind of ownership over their processes or the space that they're in or the camp that they're a part of. It makes them feel more involved and makes them feel more connected. Um, it's also just more fun. And then almost selfishly, if you can involve people in making decisions as a middle manager, you have to make less decisions yourself. Like it's just like that's just like a win-win for everybody. Like if you can get people to willingly and or even just ask them, and again asking those questions, if you can ask them to involve them in making decisions, you're gonna improve kind of the environment for not only yourself but everyone else as well, because they're gonna have more ownership, they're gonna be more involved. I think another thing with managing others, we spoke about it a little bit earlier in terms of like just kind of visiting the locations or having personal relationships with people, is accessibility. And I think just being available, a lot of times we think that we're available and like because we have a lot of free time, or we don't necessarily have free time, but we have a lot of flexibility in how we choose to spend our time. But I think being physically accessible, and this is something that I learned very directly from being able to witness Sarah Kurt's work at a camp called Camp Tall Tree. And even though Kurtz was like the big director making decisions with Scott and Sil and all those cool people, right? She was also like building sandcastles in the sand, right? Because she knew that waterfront was a hectic time, and she knew that it was very likely that like something was gonna pop off, right? Some sort of camper scenario or counselor scenario where someone would need help or a little bit of extra guidance. She knew that, and just made herself accessible. She didn't go out of her way to find trouble, but she definitely knew where it was likely to happen, and made herself accessible in those moments for when they were likely to happen. And I think that's a key part of middle management is making sure that you're accessible for people to come to you for that management or that supervision that we're expected to give them, as well as being accessible for your supervisors to either soundboard ideas off of, or make sure that like it's just one less thing they have to worry about in terms of like, I know like when I am a director, the last thing I want to do is have to wonder how can I find the person that's supposed to be helping me. So kind of like accessibility is another one. So involved in decisions and accessibility.
Accessibility, I want to pop in for just a second and like point out what you said, like, because I think that's brilliant about just being where, kind of thinking about where the problems are going to be and putting yourself there. But like, not only did Kurtz go there, which was great, but like she didn't like go there and stand in the back. Like I feel like a lot of middle managers might. It's just like you're just back there standing, or maybe you're talking to some kids, but like she was full on playing, and what a difference that makes to the people that you manage. So I just wanted to stop and point that out. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely being like, because like so and like I read online like a scenario, and it was about like cashiers and like a head cashier, and it was like if a cashier ever needed help at like a retail spot, they would call the head cashier, and like the expectation is like the head cashier knows how to work the actual register themselves. And like that's what Kurtz was demonstrating. Kurtz in that moment is demonstrating, it's like, I know how to engage with campers, I know how to engage with people in that moment. And it's like a very clear sign. And it's like, not only are you being accessible for me, but you're also showing me another way that I might be able to engage and be more successful in my role. And that's something we can do. And that's kind of the influence that Kurtz has, right? Because like she might not know I was like watching her like play sandcastles and stuff like that, and like being like, I should try that one day. I should try building a sandcastle or inviting somebody to build a sandcastle one day. But like just her influence alone, like my eyes were that way. Whereas like there was probably a bunch going on in the waterfront, but that's what I noticed. And that's that influence as well, kind of all wrapping in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you have any other than decision making and accessibility? I kind of cut you off to point that out, but
I think I have like two things that I think that are like more so with managing others, and one's like a very specific one, one's like a not too specific one, and the one is like kind of just, is that me? One is like
sorry, I don't know how to make it on my computer. I'm a new Mac person.
But no, I think finding ways to and I think this is the culmination of all the things we talked about, finding ways to almost build credit or invest in your community and others and build people up is definitely something that it goes with like managing others. And I think both like, and kind of building credit for yourself with the people you supervise, right? Making sure that they feel safe or comfortable or and enjoy their time around you is a big thing. But also finding ways to build relationships or build credit with co-counselor relationships or camper to counselor relationships or director to counselor. That's kind of what you talked about with like you wanted to make sure that your counselors thought nothing bad at the YMCA and you wanted to make sure that your directors thought nothing bad at the counselors that were below, right? You found ways to build credit and invest in them so that, or build credit between the two of them and kind of bridge that gap again to make sure that everyone's successful. I think the more you can find ways to have other people give other people big ups or have other people just enjoy the presence and the ideas and the culture and the community of other people. I think that's like another critical role that we have as middle managers is kind of just being able to invest and build that credit up, not only between ourselves and other people, but just other people and other people.
Yeah, and that's genius, like, because it there's no downside of that. Like maybe a little bit more of your energy, but not enough to really matter. And that helps build the kids, it helps build the staff, which helps build our world, and it helps build your camp. Like that's gonna, the credit is what helps your retention, whether it's staff retention or camp retention and just satisfaction. So it's so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think those are like my top three things when I think of like managing others. It's like that involvement in decisions, accessibility, and find ways to build credit.
Yeah. I have a curveball question for you that I think that people might be wondering when it comes to middle management. Middle management is kind of where you get in that maybe first place of giving feedback. And I know, especially if you're a first time middle manager, you probably just, because I just think of myself like as being I grew up at a YMCA camp in Mississippi, was a counselor there. The next summer I came back as like the camp director, the only adult on property in charge of all these people who I'd just worked with. So it's hard to give feedback to them. But you and Jack Schott have a pretty good relationship and have for years, and you worked for Jack last summer at Stomping Ground. So is there anything you were friends with some of the people at Stomping Ground, I think. So is there anything that you advice you have around getting feedback or giving feedback to people who are friends? Because in middle management, you really are like likely to have like actual relationships and friendships with people above you and below you. So it is a strange place sometimes.
Absolutely. I think it's actually interesting, and I'm trying to remember managing my peers in the beginning, and I think the way I went about it in the beginning was we were always friends until I had to be a supervisor. And like, I was always kind of a supervisor as well. I was like a 70-30 kind of split between being a friend and a supervisor, because I don't think that our relationship has to change too much just because now I have a little, a slightly fancier title and more responsibilities as well. Like definitely it's not just title. And then there were times where I had to switch a little bit and it would turn into 30-70. But what I would do is I would clearly say like, hey, right now, like as a insert title here, I need you to do this thing. And I think being able to reveal like where the instruction and direction is coming from definitely goes a long way in terms of giving feedback. Like as a unit leader, I need you to be doing this thing. This is what I'm seeing you do. And I need you as a so-and-so to do this, right? And I think also you can also come on at the same approach. It's like, as a friend, I need you to help me out with this thing. And maybe, and however you see fit there. I think also receiving feedback, something that I've learned from working at Stomping Ground, is I think the easiest way to receive feedback is to ask for it. Something that we do that I learned from Jack actually, something that he does and now that I do is there's bikes going on outside. I'm in Center City, Philadelphia right now. It's hot out. But is after we do an activity or after we do like anything, right? We might do a evening program. We might do a introduction welcome. We might do a song and whatever it is. After we just go, what are 3 things you liked about that activity? Like, what are 3 things you liked about what we did? And then afterwards we go, what are 3 things that we can improve on as we go forward? And we just invite anyone. Like it's between, we invite our friends, we invite the campers to tell us, we invite the counselors to tell us, we invite our directors to tell us. And I think if you can find ways to just ask that question And it doesn't have to be three things. It can be like, hey, can you just tell me like one thing I can do better, and to like help you, to support you at the waterfront? Can you tell me one thing I can do better to make sure that kids are eating on time? Can you tell me one thing I can do better to help you distribute meds? And I think literally just asking for feedback, people now feel more comfortable giving it to you. And they're likely to give it to you honestly because they know that you want it. And I think you can also do the same thing when giving feedback. It's like, hey, I have a couple of feedback tips. Are you able to like receive them right now, or like are you ready to talk about that right now, or can we schedule a time? Can we figure out a time to talk about these things? And that way, people know that it's coming. People know you don't, and it doesn't have to be like I have feedback and then it's like, oh, we gotta have a difficult conversation and they're like angsty about it the entire time. You can be like, hey, I have some positive feedback about this, and I have some negative feedback about this thing, or I have some constructive feedback about this thing. And that's something that I think that we can just do. I think if we just attack it like head on, almost in a way, it actually just relieves a lot of that like stress. And I think Will Smith says like the regardless of how you think about his recent actions, right? He has a quote that he says where the like most part about fear, like the crazy part about fear is that it only happens up until the moment where you have to actually do a thing, right? The entire action before you do anything that's like frightening, like you have no reason to be afraid except for when you get to that point. So I think if we can just tack kind of feedback head on, I think that's the best way to do
I love what you said about like making sure that people have the capacity to hear it though, because like your brain just doesn't naturally pivot that much. Like even just like I was just working on a blog post and my husband called me and he's like, can you do the Home Depot pickup? And I was like I couldn't do it, not because I didn't want to help him or not because I didn't have time, but because my brain just could not switch as fast as it needed me
it. It's
to.
not there right now.
And if you're like in the middle of like changing some camper sheets because they wet the bed and you're like trying to do it really quickly and really sneaky and like your head isn't being sneaky and your director comes up to you in the laundry room and is like, can I give you some feedback right now? Like probably not.
It's like, no, I'll let you go. Help me change these sheets first and then we can talk, right? Like,
Yeah, just you got to get your head right. So I think that that's an important question. Awesome. Well, we are getting ready to wrap up. So if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. We'll get to those. Nelson, while we're waiting for the questions, we talked about one thing previously that I think we're both very big on mentioning. So if you want to talk about how we can feed into people, what we talked about while we wait for questions.
that was super subtle. So yeah, no. So I think another thing about middle managers is that, oh, did I just turn off my?
Yeah, it's okay. You're coming back.
Let's go. Damn, I'm back. Did you guys miss me? But I think a big thing is that like the middle management there's so many middle managers that we talked about kind of that Netflix theory, right? Those health officers, those you have your inclusion specialists, you might have your program directors that are doing your evening activities, and like there are so many nuanced kind of responsibilities and roles that you have to be successful in, and like almost stumble through like those butterfly hours. But like I think like if you are just prepping for it beforehand, there are like things you can do to prep for it. And like luckily, like we just happen to also be able to like ask questions and ask for help by like maybe signing up for like a summer staff power pack that like acknowledges all these things, right? You might want to set your middle manager up for success by right, if you have that evening activity specialist, right? All camp activities is what they're going to be doing. Like Power Pack's got it. Is all I'm saying. If you have your health officer and you need a little bit of extra oomph, and like maybe, and I know as directors because I'm right there in the middle of it. I'm right there with you, right? I currently am the director of operations for three technology day camps in the DMV area, right? You're doing a million things at a million speed, and like staff training's on the horizon, but like we also need to like make sure that we have all of our registrations in order, and we have to make sure we got our COVID policies in order. So like that's the summer staff power pack that we offer at the Summer Camp Society. It's definitely the go-to golden ticket for middle management. And like I wish that if there was a summer staff power pack offered when I was doing my 7 butterfly hours of like being humble while I stumbled through middle management, I 100% wish I would have signed up for that. Whether I was a seasonal leader or a health officer or whatever it was.
This is so funny to me because I was trying to get you to talk about snacks, but I really like
Oh, what? Oh, I was like, yeah, we got to work on our
We should have
we're
had
getting
some
there.
better cues. But yeah, we'll get there. But we have some two questions. But thank you for plugging the power back. And I'll talk more about it at the end. But it is a great opportunity for our middle managers and seasonal leaders. We got two questions. So, what would you recommend for middle management to feel more comfortable in being assertive?
I would say that if you're a director or you're responsible for staff training or leadership training, there's an activity that I learned um, from Sylvia Van Meerten, who is just an amazing human being and camp professional and just awesome person in general. And it's called "Can I Have My Pen?" And I think as middle managers, we need to get comfortable saying the word need instead of can. And I think that's like the biggest difference between that's like the biggest jump and being assertive and without like being like aggressive or like overwhelming is just being able to say the word need. Um, and how the activity goes is that you pretty much just have like a group of a couple of pens. It doesn't have to matter what the object is, but we use a couple of pens. I'll use my uh, earphone case, right? And how the activity goes is if I'm the director, all I'm having my leadership team ask me for their pen back or their headphone case back. And what they need to do in order to actually get it is they need to be able to like be assertive and like say like, hey, I need you to give me my pens back, or I need you to give me my headphone case back. And what you often will find is that if people aren't comfortable with being assertive because of how kind of like we've been trained, just like society, right? A lot of people typically say can and ask a question when they're telling somebody to do something. Like, can you go do this thing? Can you close the door? Can you call the person? Can you do this, that, and the third? Right. And I think if we can train ourselves to start saying, hey, I need you to go call the thing, or hey, I need you to do this thing, it completely transforms the direction from being kind of passive and giving people choice in what they can do to saying like, hey, I need to do this. There is no question there. It's a statement. It's a declarative sentence.
Yeah, I love that. And I do a lot of consulting and advising. So with the YMCA camp that I just left, and we have a new camp director who came in. They didn't have an exec, so they were rehiring my position, the executive director, new camp director, so really on his own, thrown to the wolves. Never been a camp director before, and the feedback that we heard from staff was it was very confusing because he would make things sound like a suggestion or an idea, and he didn't tell us for sure that we need to do this, and so they felt lost. So that's like the importance of doing it that way too. I think instilling that in your middle managers, it's not just being nice, it leads to confusion, helps them do their job better. And I think that's a great
Absolutely.
exercise. I love that. We have another question of how do you ask your executive director for more/new responsibilities without taking on too much?
That's a wonderful question, and I was thinking about that maybe just like less than 24 hours ago, and I was thinking about burnout, and I was wondering how do you know that you're about to burn yourself out until you've burned yourself out at least once? And it's like how do you know where your limits are until you burn yourself out at least once? Um, so I think that it's it's like okay to take on too much sometimes, right? Because then you realize because once you take on too much in that moment, you like know that you're doing too much. Like it's like very clear, no questions asked, you're doing too much. And then it's also okay to backtrack and say like, hey, this is too much. Can I offload? So I think to answer your question, how do you ask your executive for more and new responsibilities? I think you kind of just do it. You say like, hey, right now this is what I'm doing. I'm doing A, B, and C. But I feel like I have a lot more free time or I have a lot more flexibility in my schedule to be doing a bit more. Are there any other activities or responsibilities that you're currently doing that I could possibly take off of your plate? And like, and as much as directors try to like be very good at everything, there are a lot of directors out there that are not very good at delegation. And like that because one delegation is just very hard. So that's not a dig. Delegation is very hard. So being able to just ask that question and kind of just again taking it head on, like I would like to do more. I feel like I have the time and the capacity to do more. Are there any things? And then what I think you should also do is specifically if you can come with specifics, right? If you can now, because again, that's another one of those like if you're now becoming involved in a decision, that's one less decision your director has to make is decide what responsibilities to give you. So I think if you not only just ask the question, but come with specific responsibilities that you have in mind that you would enjoy doing, right? If you want to be responsible for the buddy board, you want to be responsible for making sure that people are taking their breaks. I think when you ask that question, come with a few specific things that you can do that you know your director does, that you can take off their plate that you will be able to handle. But I think also be also when you mention that, say like, but also I would love to know once I take this on that if it becomes too much, would you feel okay with me like kind of handling it back to you, or like maybe splitting the task some way? And I think that's also a conversation that you want to think about having, because again, you don't really know where your limit is until you've reached it.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just thinking, while you were talking, as a former executive director of a camp, who is awful at delegating, if someone had come and asked me like, what extra responsibilities can I have? I was always like, I got it. Because I honestly, I didn't have the capacity in my schedule or in my day. And I know this is sad, and I know we should make more time and capacity for our staff, but I wasn't at a point where I could think of what else they could do and think about what that would look like. And the idea of like onboarding them to take over something that I was doing was really overwhelming for me. But when someone who worked for me came and said, I've been thinking a lot about Camp Store. This is like a 2-second spiel on how I can do it, what my thoughts are, like pretty concise. I didn't need like a whole presentation made on it. Just like, I've been thinking about Camp Store. These are some ideas I have. I can look at vendors, no problem. Can I take that off of you? I'm like, absolutely, that'd be such a big help. So I think what you said about like having the ideas in mind is really key. And then you want to have a backup plan if you need to get out of it. But I think that that's an important part.
Absolutely. I think specifics are key. I think if you can specifically ask for it, then there's like very little reason to not be able to take on more responsibilities.
All right. So we have 4 minutes left.
I do want to talk about snacks real quick.
Okay.
Just like I'll take a minute and a half. My 100%, I like will 100% roll over and die on this hill. The impact of snacks as a middle manager is ridiculous. The impact of snacks, and just knowing people's snacks and being able to provide snacks, right? Whether you're providing snacks at a meeting, whether you're providing snacks as a pick me up, whether you're providing snacks as just like a way to start a conversation and a talking piece. I've seen snacks used at camp in so many various ways that have just only really I've never seen snacks like cause detriment to a situation and like my entire time. And like how I currently use snacks right now in my position is I'll ask, as I'm hiring staff, I'll ask them in the interview what their favorite snack is, right? Now, what I'm thinking is not only is this a way to like not only ease a little bit of tension and relax the interview a little bit and get them more comfortable just talking to me about things they're passionate about. One, because when people ask you your favorite snack, you're gonna get passionate. Someone asks me what my favorite snack is, I'm gonna go on a 3-day rant about why Lifesaver gummies are like the most amazing snack in the world. But now I know right when we eventually reach that like summer slump, or like when we eventually reach like that rough patch, that or like that day where I'm only on my 20% instead of my 100%, I know how I can interact with someone where it's like an instant pick me up, and then I can like, and that might not be the cure, that might be the cure all, but that might be that like initial step that I need to figure out what I do need to do to support you. Right, if I can show up and I just hand you if I show up and I hand you like your favorite like drink and it's Gatorade, now we're just talking about Gatorade, and now I can start to talk about like, hey, I noticed this thing, like, is there anything I can do to support you? And I think that's just like the entryway. Also, snacks are just awesome. That's my spiel about snacks.
Totally agree. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Nelson. I put in the chat how to get in touch with me. And if you have questions for Nelson, I can field them to him through that. So that is the best contact for us right now. Nelson did mention the Power Pack. He is a Summer Camp Society faculty member, and he's presenting in the Power Pack. The Power Pack is aimed for seasonal staff leaders. There are 10 different trainings. I'm going to try to name them all, but I'm going to forget some, and that's okay because I'm going to send you the website later. But it is our seasonal leaders training. Nelson is doing hidden curriculum inclusion basics at camp. There's all camp acts for your office administrators. There's a healthcare one. There's soliciting and receiving staff feedback. There is a staff training engagement one. There's elevate your CIT program for your CIT coordinators, and there is working with teens. So I did get all 10 of them. So that is all of the ones with the Power Pack. You get 2 spots in each of those and the recording. So that's really awesome. And something that I think about with that is like I had a situation a couple of years ago where my waterfront director was a terror. Unfortunately, it was a bad hire on my part, and I could not get rid of him because there was no one else. I couldn't train anyone else on waterfront in the middle of the summer. But if I had this Power Pack and I had a video of waterfront training, I could have hired someone else, given them that training online. It would have been a whole different situation. And it's just, you have a ton on your plate right now. Like, thank you so much for even being here, because we know that y'all are incredibly busy. So it just gets one thing off your plate. It's all done by camp experts, camp consultants who know what they're talking about, so it can be trusted. And it's just great overall, super affordable. And we always offer scholarships. So I'll send that information out post seminar so you can have it. And it's on our website if you want to check it out before you see our email. But yeah, thank you so much, Nelson. This was great. Again, we appreciate everybody coming. Nelson, do you have any final words other than snacks?
Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for supporting me as well and helping me out. Thank you for engaging in the chat. That really helps me out a lot. And I think it'll help a lot of people out a lot. And other than that, that's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Look for our email and look for Nelson's blog post about music. Sorry, I just blanked out. Music coming soon. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Good luck getting ready for summer.